I took on the incredible challenge of fully restoring this 1975 Chevy Camaro from a rusted disaster to a beautiful street machine, all so I can give it away to my mom. In the last episode, we battled rust, dove into the world of welding, and started working on getting our engine ready for its rebuild. But our mission is far from over. Today, we deep dive into the powerhouse of this car. So get ready for an adrenaline-fueled ride as we rebuild this non-running Chevy 350 engine from the ground up and unleash its true power. But that's not all. We're taking it a step further with some high-performance upgrades that will make this engine an absolute beast on the road. This is gonna be one wild ride. Now take a look at this beauty in all its rusty glory. This engine has seen better days, that's for sure. But you know what they say, where there's rust, there's potential. At least I think they say that. But it's time to roll up our sleeves and get down and dirty and bring this powerhouse back to life. But we're not just stopping at a simple rebuild. We're cranking up the power with some serious upgrades. We're talking upgraded pistons, high performance heads, a new intake manifold, and hold on to your seats, because we're also installing a super powerful hydraulic roller Howard's camshaft. We're going to be turning this engine into an absolute monster. The first step in our engine rebuild process is cleaning. We want to ensure that every component is free from dirt, debris, and old gasket material. And last episode, we left the engine in an electrolysis bath for 3 days to loosen up all the rust, grease, and old paint on the engine block. Then, using a combination of degreaser and a wire brush, we carefully clean the whole engine, paying special attention to the cylinder walls, oil galleys, and the machine surfaces. Next up, we have to install the freeze plugs. These plugs seal off the holes in the engine block where coolant will eventually run through. With a hammer, a socket, and a bit of finesse, we tap each freeze plug into place, ensuring a snug fit and a watertight seal. There's quite a few freeze plugs on these old Chevy 350 engines, and once the big ones are done, we still have to move on to the small freeze plugs and the threaded plugs. So with all the freeze plugs and threaded plugs properly sealed and installed, we can now move on to the next part of the restoration. Now it's time to install the camshaft bearings. These bearings provide a smooth surface for the camshaft to rotate on. In order to install these, I used a specialty camshaft bearing installation tool that allows me to apply equal pressure to the lip of the camshaft bearing without damaging it. If we don't install these right, we could block oil and end up with catastrophic engine failure. So I carefully hammered each bearing into its designated location after triple checking where the oil holes were supposed to be positioned. With the camshaft bearings finally installed, we can now start working on the cylinders. Now these cylinders are extremely glazed and dirty, which means they're not going to move oil in the way the pistons will need it to move to stay lubricated. To prepare the cylinder walls for the new pistons, we use a ball-style hone. This tool removes the glaze, dirt, and imperfections, which helps create a smooth surface for optimal piston ring seating. So the basic steps of honing out a cylinder is to use a ball hone like this. You're gonna jam it down inside of the cylinder after it's all lubed up with WD-40, and then you spin it with a drill at a constant pace, and you move it in and out as you go, and that ideally creates a 45-degree cross-hatching pattern through the entire thing. Now obviously this isn't going to be perfect, but you go for as close to perfect as possible. 45 degrees is a very specific measurement, so you get it as close as you can visually. That's about all you can ask for without a machine shop involved. So we start our honing process by getting our drill spinning and jamming the ball hone down into the cylinder. And you can watch here as I spin it in and out, back and forth, that cylinder is going to slowly get brighter and brighter and start looking more like raw metal. And as we pull it out and wipe everything down, you can see how nice and clean these cylinders are looking. So we'll repeat that process with the other 7 cylinders, and look how good this engine looks. Now that we have our cylinders cleaned up and ready for pistons, we're officially done getting the block ready and can start installing our new parts. First up is the crankshaft, which is responsible for moving the pistons inside the engine. And we had to take this to a specialty machine shop here in Kentucky to get it balanced within half a gram of weight alongside our new pistons. To install this beast, we carefully align the crankshaft journals with the main bearings, lower it into place, and then tighten everything down to spec with a torque wrench. Now, since the crankshaft is in, we can get our pistons installed. However, after attempting to assemble the pistons myself, I realized just how much can go wrong here. The wrist pins hold the piston and the connecting rod together, and the connecting rod has to be super heated in order to fit the wrist pin through because they're pressure fit together. And as a result of that, you get some very weird DIY methods. So all we have to do is heat this up super hot. It should turn blue. It is all clean on the inside here, just trying to feel with my finger to make sure we're good. And then once it's heated up, we're gonna take the pin, we're gonna slide it through, and then it'll be locked in and we'll have one completed piston. Shoot. Our first attempt at this has been a failure, and I'm not exactly sure what the best way to finish this is now. Now, I didn't realize it when I first was putting everything together, but this little piece chipped off from the ring right here, and I know this is 100% my fault. I totally should not have done what I did, but there's nothing that I can do about it now. Live and learn and realize that it's thankfully only a piston head. The connecting rod is in totally fine condition. We were able to push the pin out, get it detached again, and we're just gonna have to replace these pieces. After that piston disaster, I decided to take these to a machine shop to get the wrist pins properly pressure fit without risking breaking any more of my brand new pistons. So with the pistons back from the machine shop, it's time to finally install them. One by one, we carefully slide each piston into its designated cylinder, making sure the piston rings are properly aligned, and then using a piston ring compressor tool, I'm able to compress the rings and guide the piston into place. With each piston installed, I have to turn the block upside down and bolt it in using the rod caps. But soon, all 8 pistons were installed and turning. But they weren't turning very smoothly. At this point, I felt like something was wrong, almost like something was sticking. But my lack of knowledge of engines told me I would be fine, and everything would eventually, self-clearance? Which just means rubbing metal together as fast as you can until it eventually moves smoothly. And if you didn't catch on, that's not a good method of building engines, and I'll get back to this problem in a minute. Moving forward from the piston install, I decided I wanted to add a touch of personality to our engine. So I decided to paint it yellow to make it stand out, and eventually will match the racing stripes on the car. So I masked off all of the sensitive parts that shouldn't get paint on them, and threw a coat of high temperature primer and high temperature engine enamel paint on our engine. And it was starting to finally look like a proper engine again. Now let's install the oil pump, a critical component for engine lubrication. We carefully position it on the engine block, making sure it aligns with the pins in the engine block, and then properly set the depth of the oil pickup. Now, to ensure the oil pickup stays securely in place, I have to throw a small tack weld on the connection between the pickup and the pump itself. Now, a properly timed engine is crucial for optimal performance, so it's time to install the timing chain, which is surprisingly one of the hardest parts of an engine to install incorrectly. With the engine at top dead center and the camshaft properly aligned, we carefully position the timing chain, making sure it engages with both gears on the crankshaft and camshaft, and then once in place, we just secure the gears in place with their bolts. Next, we move on to the oil pan, which plays a vital role in storing and circulating engine oil. Now, prior to installing this, I have to clean the mating surface of both the engine block and the oil pan itself, and then install a new oil pan gasket. Now for this build, I was originally just using cork gaskets and some silicone gasket maker, but I'll soon learn that those are not the best option. That being said, I carefully aligned the oil pan, secured it with the appropriate bolts, and ensured a tight seal to hopefully prevent any oil leaks. Hopefully. So I continued building and put the brand new aluminum heads on the engine, which would have been fine if I didn't later find out that all of the valves in the heads were stamped with serial numbers from a used parts dealer from China, and the bolts I was given to install the heads also kept breaking. Legally, I probably can't say that these are what I found on the internet, but after some searching, I was able to find an Amazon listing here with valves that look literally identical to the one that I'm holding in my hand. Now, I don't want to trash a brand specifically, but these are $60 for a full set on Amazon, and we all know what Amazon and eBay parts are like. They are the 0.1 extended length valves, thankfully, so they are meant to at least go in aluminum heads, but they're definitely not manly valves, which I have a quote from the seller who sold me this saying that they were. Now, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse by going on and on about how crappy certain sellers' parts are on the internet, but for a seller to tell me that they are manly valves, and I mean this in like a private message when I was complaining about the quality of the kit, they said, oh, they're not trash, they're manly valves, only for them to be found on Amazon for $60 for a full set of these. I'm not too happy with being directly lied to. If you want to lie and put out a listing on eBay that claims to have a kit with all of these great parts in it, that's one thing. But if I privately message you and ask about the quality of things and you lie straight to my face to then be proven wrong, I got a bone to pick with you. I got a bone to pick with the seller who gave me this kit. But I pushed through and got the heads fully installed, junkyard valves and all. And before you comment saying I'm an idiot for this, trust me, I know. I will get to the problem soon, I promise. Next on my list was valve adjustment, which is crucial for optimal engine performance and longevity. With the engine rotated to the proper cylinder firing position, we use a simple socket to set each valve and pushrod to the correct zero lash clearance. This ensures a proper valve operation and prevents future issues such as valve float. Finally, once all the valves are set, we can install the intake manifold. The manifold is responsible for delivering the air-fuel mixture to the cylinders, and I applied a thin layer of gasket maker to both sides of the intake manifold gaskets for a secure seal, and then carefully align the manifold and drop it into place. Then tighten the bolts in the specific sequence to the manufacturer's torque spec, and we're good to go. Now the second to last piece to go on is the distributor. This mushroom-looking apparatus, sometimes known as a sparkulator, is responsible for sending electricity to the spark plugs and igniting the fuel mixture. It has to be perfectly aligned and timed in sequence with the engine, because if it isn't, I could cause major damage to the internal components. Obviously, being completely new to engine building, I watched a few YouTube videos and proceeded to drop the distributor into place, hoping it was close enough. Then last but not least, I installed the starter motor, which is responsible for physically turning the whole engine over during ignition, and it must be strong enough to fight the intense compression in the cylinders. So with the starter properly aligned with the flywheel teeth, I secured it into place. Now at this point, I considered myself done with the engine restoration, and excitedly rolled the engine to the front of my garage to run jumper cables from my truck to the starter, just to see if I could get the whole assembly to move. But when I connected everything together, the starter just clicked. All right, here we go. Cranking test number 1 with the new starter. Looking back at this moment, it's obvious to me what the problem was. Jumper cables are a horrible way to deliver 600 amps of electricity to a starter. You need a 2-gauge wire to properly send that much power to a starter, and my jumper cables were way smaller than that. At the time, I was so new to working on engines that I began to panic, and I thought I had built something completely wrong. And while I wasn't completely right, I also wasn't completely wrong. I got in touch with an expert engine builder to talk about the problems, and he suggested pulling the oil pan off and looking at the crankshaft to see if anything was sticking. And unrelated to my wiring issue, I found that the bearings I had installed for my crankshaft were too small, and they weren't allowing the crankshaft to move smoothly, which if you remember earlier, I said it felt like the engine was sticking when I turned it over. I ran a plasti-gauge test, and it was like right on the edge of the tolerance, but I ran it on one of the middle bearings. And so now I ran it on that bearing on the end, and it's 0.0015, and it's supposed to be about 0.0025. So we're almost a full 1,000th off of where it should be. Now, as a result of that tighter bearing, it's building up way too much friction, and it's keeping the engine from turning over properly. Now, I took all the caps off, I loosened up all of the pistons here, and when I turn it over, you can actually hear this bearing squeaking. That is this bearing right here squeaking. And if that one's tight, that means that one's tight, that means that one's tight, that means that one's tight, and it means the big one is tight. Now that I knew what was causing one of the problems, I decided to use the opportunity of taking the crankshaft and oil pan off to rebuild the engine for a second time, and replace all of the cheap knockoff parts I had previously purchased with high quality parts from established brands. It was an expensive learning experience to buy an entire second engine worth of parts, but it was absolutely worth the peace of mind knowing I could rely on the quality. So I replaced the crankshaft bearings, pistons, piston rings, timing chain, and starter. And this is when I decided to put our performance camshaft in. So I also totally rebuilt the heads with new valves, springs, and seals, and then took everything back to the machine shop to be rebalanced, machined, and brought to the highest quality possible. I then began the second rebuild of my engine, and I'll skip over all the boring parts because we just went through all of that. So fast forward to my second time getting excited to hear the engine crank over, with all the new parts installed. At the time, I still had no idea that jumper cables were a bad way to run a starter, so I continued making the same mistake over and over, and could not get the starter to turn. I tried everything from high torque starters to different grounds and even higher powered batteries, and feeling absolutely defeated, I finally reached back out to my engine building expert and asked for advice. Which is when he plainly told me that I had the problem-solving skills of a moldy spoon, and that I just needed to get a thicker electrical wire. And sure enough, one trip to the store later, I finally got to witness this. With the engine finally cranking, I then had to check to make sure we had spark coming from our plugs. And as you can see here, those spark plugs were firing perfectly. After weeks of working on the engine, we finally had compression and spark, and now we just needed fuel. So I ran some basic rubber hoses through a fuel filter and dropped a fat carburetor on top of the engine because I was so excited to hear it run for the first time. Now before I get this running, do y'all remember my distributor install? Good, because unsurprisingly, I did it wrong. I had installed my distributor completely backwards from where it needed to be, which did result in a very cool but very bad problem. So while I let the 7-year-old inside me enjoy the 2-foot flames coming out of my exhaust, I was also still worrying because my engine would not start. And once again, I reached out to one of my engine experts for help, and they told me to check the distributor. Sure enough, I found my problem, and after turning it back the proper way, I gave it one more crank. Let's see if we can get it this time. Yes! Yes! Oh, the headers are smoking. Everything is smoking. Oh my god. I'm covered in oil. With the engine finally running, I couldn't help but take in the sound, the smells, the vibration. I had actually done it. I built an engine. So we've got our engine running again, but that doesn't mean we're anywhere close to the end of this build. We've still got a whole transmission to rebuild, a ton of wiring, and a boatload of bodywork to go. So make sure you hit that notification bell and subscribe, and you will not miss the next episode of this rebuild of the '75 Chevy Camaro.